There are moments when the world goes quiet. Not silent, quiet. A different kind of stillness that doesn't come from the absence of noise, but from the presence of something deeper. And in that quietness, some people begin to see, not with their eyes, with something else. Something older, something that's been waiting beneath the surface of their entire life. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange sensation when you're in a crowded room surrounded by conversation and laughter, and suddenly you're alone. Not lonely, alone. As if you've stepped through an invisible threshold into a place where everyone else is still moving, still talking, still living, but you're watching it all from somewhere just beyond reach, and what you see there, in that space between yourself and the world, changes everything. Thomas Merton knew this place. He spent years in silence, in contemplation, mapping the inner territories where most people never venture. And what he discovered wasn't comfort. It wasn't peace at first. It was something far more unsettling. The realization that spiritual awakening doesn't make life easier. It makes it truer. And truth, real truth, doesn't arrive like sunshine through a window. It arrives like water breaking through a dam, with force, with consequence, with the undeniable weight of everything you've been pretending not to know. The awakened person doesn't gain powers, they lose illusions, and that loss, that stripping away of comfortable stories, is both the greatest gift and the heaviest burden a human being can carry. Let me tell you what happens when you begin to see. When the veil starts to thin, when your perception shifts even slightly toward what Merton called the hidden wholeness, you start noticing contradictions everywhere. Not small ones, fundamental ones. You watch people chase what they claim will make them happy, only to become more anxious with each achievement. You see relationships built on need disguised as love. You witness entire societies constructing elaborate systems to avoid the one question that matters. What are we really doing here? And the strangest part? You can't unsee it. Once you notice the gap between what people say and what they actually mean, between what they believe and what they truly feel, between the masks they wear and the souls hiding underneath, you can't go back. You're awake in a world that's still dreaming. And the dream, once you're outside of it, looks so fragile, so desperate, so beautifully, tragically human. This is where the loneliness begins, not because you're better than anyone else, never that, but because you're speaking a different language now. When someone complains about their problems, you hear the deeper problem beneath the problem. When someone shares their triumph, you sense the emptiness they're running from. When someone asks how you are, you feel the weight of everything an honest answer would require, and you smile and say fine, because the truth would take hours, and they're not really asking anyway. Merton understood this isolation intimately. Here was a man who chose silence, who retreated to a monastery, who spent decades in prayer and contemplation. And what did he discover? That even in the most sacred spaces, even among those dedicated to spiritual life, people are still asleep, still attached, still afraid. The monastery didn't protect him from human confusion. It magnified it, made it impossible to ignore. He wrote once about the peculiar suffering of those who see through the collective delusions of their time, how they're called cynical when they're actually heartbroken, how they're dismissed as negative when they're simply refusing to pretend, how they're told to lighten up by people who are drowning in the very heaviness they won't acknowledge. And here's the paradox that cuts the deepest. Spiritual awakening is supposed to bring peace. That's what all the books promise, what all the teachers claim. Enlightenment is bliss. Awakening is freedom. The truth will set you free. And it does, eventually. But first it destroys you. First it takes everything you thought you knew and reveals how much of it was just scaffolding around emptiness. First it shows you the suffering you've been causing and receiving, the patterns you've been repeating, the ways you've been asleep while thinking you were awake. The spiritually awakened person sees suffering differently, not just their own, everyone's. They walk through the world with a kind of transparency to pain. They feel it in the checkout line at the grocery store, in the forced cheerfulness of the barista, in the eyes of the stranger on the subway who's holding themselves together with sheer will. They see the quiet desperation that Thoreau spoke of, but they see something else too, the extraordinary courage it takes just to keep going, just to show up, just to try again tomorrow. And this awareness becomes a kind of burden. Because once you see how much people are hurting, how can you contribute to that hurt? How can you be careless with your words? How can you judge? How can you demand? How can you take without thinking about the person giving? You become careful, conscious, tender. And the world isn't built for tenderness. The world rewards hardness, speed, efficiency. The world tells you to toughen up, to stop being so sensitive, to get over it. But you can't. Because sensitivity isn't weakness. It's perception. And perception, once refined, doesn't become less. It becomes more. More aware, more attuned, more alive to the subtle frequencies that most people have learned to tune out. I once knew someone who described awakening as learning to see in ultraviolet. They said, imagine if suddenly you could see colors that no one else could see. At first, you'd be amazed. You'd point them out to people. Look at that purple, look at that light. And people would look at you with concern. There's no purple there, they'd say. Are you feeling okay? And eventually, you'd stop pointing. You'd stop trying to share what you see. You'd just live with this expanded vision, alone in a world of people who think they're seeing everything. That's what spiritual awakening feels like. You're seeing frequencies of reality that others have filtered out. And the filtering isn't their fault. It's survival. Most people can't afford to see too much, feel too much, question too much. They have jobs to keep, families to feed, identities to maintain. The luxury of deep questioning, the privilege of spiritual crisis, these aren't available to everyone. And the awakened person knows this, which makes the loneliness even more complex, because it's not just, I see what you don't see. It's I see what you can't afford to see right now, and I understand why, and I don't blame you. And I'm still alone with this seeing. Merton wrote extensively about the false self, that constructed identity we build from others' expectations, from cultural conditioning, from our own need to be acceptable. And he described the terrifying process of watching that false self dissolve, because we are so identified with it. We think we are that self, the successful one, the good one, the spiritual one, the strong one, the independent one. And then awakening comes along and whispers, that's not you, that's just a costume you've been wearing for so long you forgot you put it on. And when the costume starts to come off, who are you underneath? That's the question that keeps awakened people up at night, because beneath the costume isn't another, better identity. Beneath the costume is mystery, is vastness, is something that can't be named or claimed or understood. And that's beautiful, yes, but it's also absolutely terrifying. The awakened person lives with uncertainty in a world that demands certainty. They hold paradox in a culture that insists on binary choices. They embrace mystery in a society that worships information, and this makes them strangers in their own land. They don't fit. They can't fit. Because they've seen that the categories everyone else accepts as real are just agreements, just collective decisions about how to carve up infinity into manageable pieces. And here's what happens next, and this is where many people get stuck. The awakened person becomes judgmental, not intentionally, not consciously. But when you see through certain illusions, it becomes difficult to respect those who are still entranced by them. When you've questioned your own conditioning, it becomes frustrating to watch others mechanically following theirs. When you've tasted even a moment of genuine freedom, it becomes painful to witness voluntary imprisonment. This is a trap, a subtle one, a sophisticated one, because it disguises itself as wisdom. I see the truth, and they don't. But really, it's just another way of separating, another way of protecting the fragile ego that's terrified of its own recent dissolution. The truly awakened person moves through this phase. They have to. Because they realize that judgment is just another form of sleeping. It's just another way of saying, I'm right and you're wrong, which is the oldest dream of all. Merton's genius was in recognizing this trap and refusing it. He saw the illusions, he saw the suffering, he saw the collective sleep, and he responded not with superiority, but with compassion, not with detachment, but with deeper engagement. He wrote, he questioned, he challenged, but always from a place of shared humanity, never from a place of transcendent otherness. Because here's the truth that awakening eventually reveals. You're not separate from the sleeping world. You're not above it. You're not watching it from some elevated position. You're in it. You're of it. Your awakening doesn't remove you from humanity. It makes you more human, more aware of the beauty and tragedy of being a conscious creature in an often unconscious world. And this is where the real work begins. This is where awakening stops being about personal enlightenment and starts being about service. Not service in the heroic sense, not I will save everyone, but service in the simple sense of showing up with presence, with honesty, with willingness to be seen as strange or intense or too much. Because the world needs people who haven't forgotten how to feel, who haven't numbed themselves into efficiency, who haven't traded their soul's questions for society's answers. The spiritually awakened person sees grief everywhere. Accumulated grief, inherited grief, unspoken grief. Grief that's been pushed down so deep it doesn't even recognize itself anymore, just appears as anger or addiction or anxiety or endless ambition. They see it in their own family, in their friends, in the structures of power that govern daily life. And they understand that most of what we call normal is just sophisticated grief management. But they also see something else. They see the moments when someone drops their mask, even for a second. They see the flash of recognition in another person's eyes, that look that says, "You see me, don't you?" They see the hunger for meaning that pulses underneath all the distraction. They see the beauty that persists despite everything, the way humans keep creating and loving and hoping, even when nothing in their circumstances justifies hope. This is what keeps the awakened person going, not the dramatic revelations, not the mystical experiences, not the special knowledge, but these tiny moments of genuine meeting, when two people, however briefly, stop performing and just exist together. When someone asks a real question and waits for a real answer. When silence becomes comfortable instead of awkward. When truth is spoken and no one rushes to fix it or diminish it or explain it away. Merton found this in the most unexpected place, standing on a street corner in Louisville, Kentucky, watching ordinary people go about their ordinary day. And suddenly he was overwhelmed with love for them, all of them, the shoppers, the workers, the strangers who would never know his name. He saw their shared humanity, their shared struggle, their shared divinity hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. And in that moment, all the years of monastic practice, all the hours of contemplation, all the spiritual seeking, it all came down to this: love. Simple, uncomplicated, undeserved love for the human family. This is what the awakened person eventually learns. That seeing clearly doesn't mean seeing without love. That consciousness without compassion is just another form of blindness. That the whole point of waking up is to be more present to life, not more removed from it. But the journey to that realization is long, and lonely, and full of mistakes. The awakened person will go through phases of superiority, of isolation, of despair. They'll wonder if seeing clearly is worth the price of connection. They'll be tempted to go back to sleep, to rejoin the comfortable delusions everyone else shares. They'll be exhausted by the constant awareness, the inability to just relax into unconsciousness. And then something shifts. They stop trying to explain what they see. They stop waiting for others to understand. They stop using their awakening as proof of anything. Instead, they simply live from it. They make different choices. They speak differently. They listen differently. They love differently. And some people notice, and some people don't. And both are fine. Because the truly awakened person isn't trying to wake anyone else up. They understand that awakening can't be forced or taught or given. It arrives in its own time, through its own means, often through the very suffering we'd most want to avoid. Their job isn't to enlighten the world. Their job is to live awake, to be honest, to be kind, to be present, to offer what Merton called a hidden wholeness, a centeredness that others can sense even if they can't name it. And here's what becomes visible from that centered place. The awakened person sees not just what's broken, but what's possible. They see the moments when healing happens, when connection breaks through, when beauty emerges from pain. They see the gradual, almost imperceptible evolution of consciousness that's happening despite all evidence to the contrary. They see the courage in ordinary people doing extraordinary things just by showing up day after day to lives that would break most of us. They see love, real love, not the romanticized version sold in songs and movies, but the kind that stays when everything else leaves, the kind that shows up in small gestures and quiet sacrifices, the kind that doesn't demand recognition or reward. They see it in parents who are exhausted but keep going, in friends who listen even when they don't understand, in strangers who offer help without hesitation, in themselves when they forgive their own endless imperfection, and they see possibility. Not optimism. Awakening usually kills naive optimism, but something deeper, the fundamental openness of each moment, the fact that nothing is entirely fixed, that people can change, that you can change, that the next breath is always an opportunity to choose differently, to respond rather than react, to create rather than repeat. This is the secret that the awakened person eventually discovers. Spiritual awakening isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more truly yourself. More honest, more present, more willing to be vulnerable, more able to hold paradox, more comfortable with not knowing, more at peace with the mystery. And the world needs this, desperately, not more people claiming to have answers, not more gurus promising enlightenment, not more spiritual materialism disguised as wisdom, but more people willing to live in the questions, more people who can sit with discomfort without rushing to fix it, more people who speak truth even when it's inconvenient, more people who love even when it's not returned. Merton understood that the contemplative life, the awakened life, isn't separate from the active life. They're one life. Seeing clearly and acting wisely aren't two different things. They're the same thing. You can't truly see without being changed by what you see, and you can't be changed without changing how you engage with the world. So the awakened person does what they can. Not everything, just what they can. They speak when speaking helps. They're silent when silence serves. They intervene when intervention is needed. They step back when stepping back creates space. They don't have a formula. They have presence. They have awareness. They have the willingness to be imperfect in their service to something larger than themselves. And mostly they keep walking, keep questioning, keep opening, keep releasing what no longer serves, keep forgiving themselves for all the ways they still fall asleep. Because awakening isn't a destination. It's not a state you achieve and then maintain. It's a practice, a lifetime practice of returning, again and again, to presence, to truth, to love. The loneliness doesn't entirely go away. There will always be moments when the awakened person feels like an alien in human form, trying to explain colors that others can't see. But alongside the loneliness comes something else, a deep okayness with being exactly who and where you are. A recognition that your particular seeing, your particular sensitivity, your particular way of being in the world, it's not a mistake. It's not a burden you should have been spared. It's your gift. The very thing that makes you feel isolated is also the thing that makes you necessary. Because the world needs mirrors. It needs people who reflect back what's really happening beneath the surface, not with cruelty, not with superiority, but with kindness, with honesty, with the gentle insistence that there's more here than we've been told, that we're capable of more consciousness, more compassion, more courage than we've been led to believe. The awakened person becomes that mirror, not perfectly, never perfectly, but faithfully. They keep showing up, keep staying open, keep refusing to harden even when hardness would be easier, keep choosing vulnerability even when vulnerability guarantees pain, keep loving even when love seems foolish, keep hoping even when hope seems naive. And sometimes, in quiet moments, they realize that awakening hasn't separated them from others. It's connected them more deeply. Because beneath all the differences, beneath all the various stages of consciousness and unconsciousness, there's something shared, something essential, something that Merton spent his life trying to articulate. We are all one. Not in some abstract, mystical sense, but in the most concrete sense. Your suffering is my suffering. Your awakening is my awakening. Your healing is my healing. This is what the spiritually awakened person sees that others can't quite see yet, that separation is the illusion, that everything that divides us, our identities, our beliefs, our stories about who we are and who we're not, it's all constructed, useful sometimes, necessary sometimes, but ultimately optional. Underneath all of it, we're all just consciousness experiencing itself in different forms. All just love learning to recognize itself in the mirror of another. And when you see that, really see it, something inside you relaxes. The need to defend your uniqueness fades. The need to prove your worth disappears. The need to be understood by everyone releases. Because you know that your existence matters simply because you exist. You know that your seeing, however partial, however limited, is part of a larger seeing. You know that you're not carrying this awareness alone. You're sharing it with every other awakened soul who's ever lived, who's living now, who will live in the future. You're part of a lineage, a tradition, a continuity of consciousness that stretches back to the first human who looked up at the stars and wondered, what does this mean? And forward to the last human who'll do the same. You're connected to Merton in his monastery, to the mystics and poets and seekers of every tradition, to the unknown contemplatives who never wrote a word but lived their awakening in ordinary days with extraordinary presence. And you're connected to something even larger than human consciousness. You're part of the earth waking up to itself, part of the universe becoming aware of its own existence, part of the great mystery studying itself through billions of perspectives, each one necessary, each one partial, each one contributing to the whole. This is the ultimate paradox of spiritual awakening. You see that you're nothing, just a brief flicker of awareness in an infinite cosmos. And you see that you're everything, an essential expression of the whole, without which the pattern would be incomplete. You're simultaneously insignificant and irreplaceable, both truths, at the same time, without contradiction, and living in that paradox, holding both truths without needing to resolve them, that's what spiritual maturity looks like. That's what awakening grows into when given time and patience and honest engagement with life as it actually is. The awakened person stops asking, why me? And starts asking, now what? They stop waiting for their awakening to be validated by others and start validating it through how they live. They stop treating their spiritual perception as a burden and start treating it as a responsibility, not a heavy responsibility, a simple one. To be awake, to stay awake, to help in whatever small ways are available others to awaken. Not by preaching, not by teaching, but by being, by existing as proof that it's possible to live with eyes open, to feel deeply without breaking, to see clearly without becoming cynical, to love greatly without becoming dependent, to serve genuinely without becoming depleted. This is what Thomas Merton's life demonstrated. This is what every genuine spiritual teaching points toward. Not transcendence, not escape, not superiority, but presence. Radical, honest, courageous presence with what is, with life as it actually appears, with yourself as you actually are, with others as they actually are, with the world in all its beauty and brokenness, and from that presence, everything becomes possible. Not easy, but possible. Change becomes possible. Healing becomes possible. Connection becomes possible. Love becomes possible. Not because awakening gives you special powers, but because awakening removes the barriers you are unconsciously maintaining, the barriers between you and life, between you and others, between you and your own heart. So when you feel that strange loneliness, that sense of being awake in a sleeping world, remember this: you're not alone. You're joined to everyone who's ever felt this way. You're part of an invisible community of seekers and finders, of questioners and wonderers, of those who couldn't settle for comfortable lies and chose uncomfortable truth instead. And your seeing, difficult as it is a gift to you first, because it's your path to freedom, and then to others, because your awakened presence, however you express it, gives permission. It shows what's possible. It holds space for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's more to this existence than we've been told. Keep walking. Keep seeing. Keep loving. Keep staying tender in a world that teaches hardness. Keep asking questions in a world that prefers answers. Keep feeling deeply in a world that values numbness. Keep opening in a world that encourages closing. Not because it will make you popular, not because it will make you successful, not because it will make you happy in the way happiness is usually defined, but because it will make you true, authentic, real, awake. And in a world still dreaming, that might be the most revolutionary thing of all. The awakened person learns to live with contradiction. They understand that spiritual awakening doesn't resolve life's complexities, it reveals them. It shows you that existence itself is paradoxical, that you must participate fully while remaining unattached, that you must care deeply while accepting what you cannot control, that you must act with purpose while surrendering to forces larger than yourself. These aren't philosophical puzzles to be solved, they're truths to be lived. And living them requires a kind of flexibility most people never develop, because we're taught to think in either-or terms. But the awakened person discovers a third way, both and. They're both spiritual and worldly, both detached and deeply engaged, both individual and universal. Merton lived this tension beautifully. He was a monk who wrote about silence for the entire world to read, a contemplative who engaged passionately with social justice, a man of God who questioned religious institutions. He didn't try to eliminate these contradictions. He embodied them, and in doing so he showed that spiritual maturity isn't about transcending paradox, it's about becoming spacious enough to hold it. The awakened person also sees time differently, not as a line moving from past to future, but as a spiral. They see how patterns repeat, how each generation faces the same essential questions in different forms. And this perspective brings both humility and patience. Humility because you realize you're not solving anything new. Patience because you understand that transformation happens slowly, gradually, through small shifts repeated over time. They watch young people make the same mistakes they made, and instead of frustration, they feel compassion. They remember the arrogance of youth and the desperation for answers, and they understand that experience can't be transferred. Wisdom can't be given. It must be earned through living, so they don't try to spare others from necessary suffering. They offer presence instead of solutions, companionship instead of rescue. They trust the process of awakening even when it's painful, because they know that sometimes you have to break before you can heal. Sometimes you have to get completely lost before you can truly find your way. This trust is perhaps the deepest form of love. To love someone enough to let them struggle, to let them discover their own truth in their own time. The awakened person knows that protection often delays awakening, that too much guidance creates dependency, that preventing all pain creates fragility. And so, they offer the gift of space, of silence, of presence without interference. They wait, they watch, they hold space. And when someone is truly ready, truly asking, truly open, then they share, not as an expert, but as a fellow traveler who's been down this road before. The awakened person also develops a different relationship with suffering. They don't seek it out, but they don't run from it either. They've learned that suffering is often the doorway to transformation, that the moments of greatest pain are often the moments of greatest potential for growth. They've learned to ask, what is this teaching me? What perspective is this pain revealing? What attachment is this loss freeing me from? And through this questioning, suffering transforms from something that happens to them into something that happens for them. This is alchemy, the real kind, turning pain into wisdom, confusion into clarity, darkness into light. The awakened person also sees beauty differently, not just in what's conventionally beautiful, but in everything. In the wrinkled face of the elderly, in the broken things, in the ordinary moments everyone else rushes past. They see the extraordinary in the mundane, the sacred in the secular, the eternal in the temporary, and this changes their relationship with desire. They still want things, still have preferences, but there's less desperation in it. Because they've discovered that fulfillment doesn't come from getting what you want, it comes from being present with what is. And what is, when you really look at it, is already enough, already complete, already whole. And perhaps this is the final lesson of awakening, that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. That your task isn't to figure everything out, to achieve enlightenment, to become perfect. Your task is simply to be here, fully, honestly, courageously. To show up to this brief, beautiful, impossible experience of being human, with all the presence and love you can muster. Because in the end, what else is there? What else matters beyond this moment, this breath, this beating heart? The awakened person knows that nothing lasts, not success, not failure, not even awakening itself. Everything arises and passes away. Everything changes. Everything ends. And knowing this, really knowing it, they choose to love anyway. They choose to care anyway. They choose to be present anyway. Not because it will lead somewhere, not because it will achieve something, but because presence itself is the point. Love itself is the point. Being awake to this miraculous, terrible, beautiful existence, that's the point. So they walk gently through the world. They speak truthfully but kindly. They act purposefully but humbly. They love deeply but freely. And in doing so, they become what Merton called hidden contemplatives, people who carry awakening quietly, without fanfare, without trying to convert anyone, simply living as proof that another way is possible. This is what spiritually awakened people see that others can't, that the ordinary is extraordinary, that the present moment is eternity, that you are already what you're seeking, that home is not a place you arrive at, but a way of being you cultivate. That awakening is not an endpoint, but a continuous practice of returning, again and again, to here, to now, to truth, to love. And when you see this, really see it, everything changes. And nothing changes. You're still you. Life is still life. But somehow, mysteriously, beautifully, it's all different. It's all new. It's all sacred. And you walk forward into the unknown, not with answers, but with presence. Not with certainty, but with curiosity. Not with a map, but with trust. And that's enough. More than enough, it's everything.